So, good evening, one and all present here. I am Aisha Mehta, and today we have gathered here for the WCBinar 2. So, I welcome you all to the second talk of WCBinar Season 2. And WCBinar are a series of webinars on wildlife and conservation biology organized by WCB Research Foundation on third Wednesday every month. Anyone from the field of wildlife and conservation biology can apply for it. Certificate to each presenter will be given and each presentation will be featured on the official YouTube channel. Best 3 presentations to be awarded at the end of the season and selected presentations to be reviewed and are published in our newsletter Prithivya. I welcome our speaker Vrinda Dabas. She has completed her bachelor's in life sciences from University of Delhi and has a great interest in learning about large mammals and their interactions with human beings. She has interned with Wildlife Trust of India. Her internship in mammalian ecology was under Dr Nishith Dharaiya, and she worked on large mammal and human conflicts, focusing on leopard and sloth bear communities. The topic for the WCBinar is large mammal human conflicts in Gujarat. So, and one of our experts will be judging our presentation. So, over to the speaker.
Thank you, Aisha, for the lovely introduction. I'll just share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vrinda Dabas, and I'm a mammalian ecology intern at the WCB Research Foundation since last November. And under mammalian ecology, my main focus of study was studying large mammals and their interaction and conflict with human beings. And this is going to be a presentation of my internship. So several studies on human-wildlife conflict have been published, and mostly they focused on one particular animal species. However, in this study, we tried to understand mammalian ecology at large and tried to answer which environmental factors and which community factors affect human-wildlife conflict. For example, we tried to understand the effect of different seasons on conflict. Are there certain animal species which are likely to favor a particular season? Is there a particular time during the day in which an individual is likely to get into conflict with a particular type of animal? Are different age groups more susceptible to conflict with different types of animals? Is their occupation and the place that they inhabit and visit usually a factor in the same? And in order to study that, we took the 2 most prominent large mammals in eastern Gujarat, the sloth bear and the leopard. When it came to data collection, I was provided primary data by the foundation and by Dr Nishith Dharaiya. Several researchers of the WCB Research Foundation have collected this data on wildlife conflict over years. And 2 of the most prominent data contributors were Dr. Tana Mewada and Mr. Ashish Jangit. And as you can see, the data ranged all the way from 1968 up till 2020. And my objective was to combine all the databases into one particular database and analyze the information. This is a map of Gujarat and its district, and it shows at large the primary districts where most of the data was collected from. So the highest number of cases which were reported were from Chota Udaipur, followed by Dahod, and there were a few cases from Narmada and Mehsana as well. This is what the final database eventually looked like. Although we had a lot of data for sloth bears ranging from 1968 till 2020, but for leopards, the data ranged from 2008 to 2020. So for uniformity's sake and for recency in our data, we took and analyzed data from 2008 to 2020 for both the animal species. For the same, about 422 animal conflict cases were analyzed for sloth bears, and 117 entries were analyzed for leopards. And this does not just include leopard-human conflict, but also habitat and livestock depredation if it had happened. All of our data was largely divided into 4 sub-secondary data informations. For example, we had temporal information, which showed the exact time, the part of the day, the type, the date, and the season in which the conflict occurred. Then we had spatial information all the way from district to the village and geo coordinates whenever they were available. Thirdly, we had information about the victim, all personal details, whether they applied for compensation, as well as the activity which they were doing, which they were doing during the conflict, and lastly, the name of the data contributor. So we had certain limitations in our data analysis. We had 5 broad categories in which we analyzed the data. It was based on seasons, time of the day, age groups, occupation of the victim, and the size of the attack. Not all the entries, not all the 422 and 117 entries had all the data. And so only particular entries with that particular data type were analyzed under the following categories. And these are the actual number of entries which were analyzed. For occupation, we could only analyze data available for sloth bear attacks. And for site of attack, we could only analyze entries data available for leopards due to lack of information. So coming to the first category of analysis, the first analysis was season-wise analysis. So the seasons over 1 year were broadly divided into 3 major seasons: summer from March to May, monsoon from June to October, and winter for the remaining months. As it is observed from the analyzed data, the highest number of cases for both sloth bears and leopards occurred during monsoon. The contradiction actually happens at the second place. The number of attacks for sloth bears was second highest during the winters. However, for leopards, they were second highest during the winters. My bad. They were second highest for sloth bears during the summer, and they were second highest for leopards during the winter. And if we try to come up for a conclusion or an explanation for this phenomena, there are a few things that play a part. Our findings were actually pretty similar to a previous study which happened in Chhattisgarh. I believe it was the Bilaspur district. And similarly, in that study as well, the conflict cases for sloth bears were highest during monsoon, followed by summer and then by winter. An explanation for this phenomena can be that during the monsoon season, the fields are filled with crops, and sloth bears are notoriously famous for raiding crop fields such as the maize crop and the soybean crops. Secondly, farmers usually line their crop fields with different fruit trees, such as the jamun tree. Jamun is the second highest fruit crop which is sown in Gujarat. And even during the summer, the trees line up the farmland. And during the month of July is when the jamun fruit is actually the ripest. And that would be another reason why conflict cases in and around farmlands are very high during monsoon. The end of summer as well as the beginning of monsoon, which is from April to June, is the mating season for sloth bears. And even during summer, where farming activity in the farms is less, but a lot of people travel into the forest to collect MFPs and anti-FPs. And that could be a possible explanation as to why attacks are highest in summer and monsoon. The lesser number of attacks during winter could be because just at the beginning of winter is when sloth bears give birth to their cubs, and the newborn cubs and the mother usually go into hiding for a few weeks in the beginning of winters. They try to avoid traveling into human establishments or encountering human beings due to safety for their newborn cubs. So that might be a given reason why attacks are less in winter. When we talk about leopards, on the other hand, in several studies across India, it has been shown that the monsoon season is where the human-wildlife conflict with leopards and people is at its highest. That is because during the rains, the bushes and the thickets, they go very large and thick, and those provide as apt hiding spots for leopards, especially bushes in and around the farmlands. Leopards can very easily hide in those bushes and then slowly prey further into human establishments. They do not like to be cornered inside the forest during a rainy season and often come out into open areas. A second possible reason for excessive human-wildlife conflict during the monsoon against leopards could be that they have somewhat easier access to cattle, because cattle are together herded under one shed, kept open outside during the monsoon. And A third reason why the conflict is high during winter and not summer as opposed to sloth bear can be because early winter marks the breeding season for leopards, and male leopards especially travel all across their territories in search of a mate. And that could be a possible reason why the attacks are highest in winter. Coming to our second analysis, this analysis was done considering time of the day. So the day was divided into 4 major quarters: morning, afternoon, evening, and night. So as we can see from the graph, the highest percentages of attacks for both sloth bears and leopards was highest during the day. But if we look at the actual numbers, the percentages of attacks for leopards were very high during early morning hours, which is right around 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and 6 a.m. As we can see, as the sun rises and as afternoon happens, the number of cases go down for both sloth bears and leopards. They again rise in the evening. However, for sloth bears, they go down again during the night. And for leopards, the percentages of attacks continues to rise throughout the night. If we try to come up with an explanation for this phenomena, we can say that leopards are usually nocturnal and they especially show crepuscular activity, which means that they are most active during dusk and dawn. And most of the cases, if we calculate the actual percentage, happened over 65% of the attacks happened during the nighttime and early morning hours. During the day, when the sun is out, leopards usually prefer to rest and they take shade, they hide in caves, and they rest on tall trees. And that is a possible reason why the attacks are the highest during the early morning, evening, and night, and not the afternoon. Coming to sloth bears, even though sloth bears are also nocturnal, one would expect that the amount of attacks would be equally high during the night. But as we can see, the attacks go up during morning and evening, and they come down during the afternoon and the night. A possible reason for this phenomenon could be that these are the times where human activity is at its highest. Early in the morning, people go out to work in the farmlands. They take their cattle to graze and they go to the forest to collect MFPs. And in the evening, they come back from work. They're all traveling. And most of the attacks which happen against sloth bears are not intentional, but surprise attacks which occurs. They're very unpredictable in nature. And most of the times, human and sloth bear conflict occurs is when a sloth bear is taken by surprise by the presence of a human being. If they accidentally spot them in a farmland, or if they're raiding through their gardens or crop fields. So that can be a possible reason why the percentage of attacks of sloth bears are highest when the human activity is also high. Coming to our third category of analysis, third type of analysis was done based on ages. And we got a very distinct contradiction between the age groups which were attacked most by sloth bears and by leopards. So as the data suggests, most of the attacks by sloth bears happened to victims falling in the age range between 18 and 35, which is adults, young adults, and adults. Whereas for leopards, that was the least attacked demographic, and the highest number was for older adults, ages 35 plus. And from this pie chart, it's especially clearer. The light green, for the percentage of attacks of sloth bears, the light green portion depicts the number of victims which fell in 18 to 35 age category, which is almost equivalent to 60%. But if we see that for the percentage of attacks by leopards, we see that that same age group is at 8.1%. Also, the number of attacks on elder people and old people age 55 plus, as well as children below the age of 18, was incredibly high for leopards as opposed to sloth bear. A possible explanation for this, and which can also tie into the previously assessed phenomenon, is that most of the victims for sloth bears are young adults and adults, and they're likely to be working out in the fields as opposed to children and elders. And those are the particular times where people go out in the day and the evening to work, where the highest number of sloth bear attacks occurs. So that can be a possible reasoning for the same. For leopards, for example, Most of their victims were in the age range 35 to 55, and they had a considerable number of elders and children as well. Leopards usually have intentional attacks and inside human establishments. So, for example, a child who's playing outside alone, or an elder who is sleeping outside in their veranda, or someone who goes to the washroom outside their home several times during the night to relieve themselves. These are easy prey for leopards. And that can be a possible reason why the elder and the children age range is most likely to be attacked by leopards as opposed to sloth bears. Coming to the fourth category, the analysis was done based on occupation, and as one can imagine, it's easily predictable that about 50% of the victims of sloth bear attacks were farmers, followed closely by livestock rearers and laborers, and the least number were students and other individuals. And lastly, for the leopard attacks, and if we try to understand where the leopard attacks are likely to occur, we can see that if we combine the percentages of miscellaneous activity and victims at home, about 43% of the attacks occurred when the victim was either at home, they were relieving themselves right outside their home, they were sleeping in their veranda or playing in the road, or they were traveling on the road or near a canal. And that ties into our previous analysis as well, that most of the people who are doing these activities fall in the age group of 55 plus and 35 plus and below 18. The second highest number of attacks was individuals passing through farmlands or farming. And lastly, the least amount of attacks were in the forest, where the victims had gone to collect the livestock and to graze their livestock and collect MFPs. And that is it. Those were the 5 categories in which analysis was done. And it was a very short presentation. And I'd like to thank my mentor, Dr. Nishith Dharaiya. He was helping me, providing me the data and mentoring me and helping me understand the actual situation of human-wildlife conflict in Gujarat, because I was here in Jammu. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Shalu Masaria for her constant guidance. And I'd also like to thank the WCB Foundation for giving me this opportunity. The internship was a great platform to learn so much about practical understanding, even though I was sitting online, and I learned a lot about scientific writing as well. So thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Vrinda, for the amazing talk. We got to learn a lot, and I would like to thank everyone present here, and we can go ahead for the question session.
Thank you.